Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Gaming in the Wild, a video games podcast about games from the artistic, creative side of the tracks, from indie to AAA. My name's John, I'm your host, and this week in Reykjavik, it's actually dark again, I can't believe it. The season's changed, night has returned, and that's kind of fitting for the game that I'm going to talk about this episode. It's a slow, long, dark, and kind of melancholic indie game that first came to my attention via a Nintendo Indie World Direct. You may have heard of it before it came out back in 2020 and caused a bit of a stir back then. It is The Longing. And I had played this game over quite a long period of time, and during my playthrough, I was tweeting back and forth with another podcast host, the host of a podcast that I listen to every single week, one of my very favourites. I was tweeting with Brad Gallaway of the Videogames podcast. You may have heard me mention him before. And so Brad has agreed, seeing as we were both really into this one, and we're kind of going through it at the same time, to come on the show and to talk about it. So I'm really, really happy to welcome Brad onto the show for this episode. But before I get to that conversation, it was a really, really good conversation. I'm excited for you guys to hear it. I will run through a couple games, as is customary on this show, that I've been playing as well. So this week I kind of dipped back into Game Pass yet again. Game Pass has really, really been holding my attention lately, and played a bit of Omno. It's a game that I didn't know about before it arrived on Game Pass. It's an indie game by a solo developer made over many years, and it's kind of a journey-ish kind of puzzle platformer, I guess, in which you go through a strange world, befriending animals, collecting light, solving puzzles, and finding the fragments of a diary of an explorer who went this way ahead of you, seemingly far back in the past. And I have to say, I had a really good time with it. It's an undemanding game. It was 5 or 6 hours long. I blasted my way through it in 2 sessions. Really enjoyed my time with it. I actually streamed a little bit of this one. You can still see it if you missed it on twitch.tv/gaminginthewild. And I had a really great time with it. Some listeners of the show came along into that stream, and we had a lot of fun. So I think I'm going to be recording an episode about Omno, so I don't want to talk too much about it here. But if you do happen to have Game Pass and you want like a mellow experience, it's a recommendation from me. And in parallel to that game, I also dusted off a game that's been in my Switch library for quite a while now. I picked it up on sale a while back. Lots of people that I know have recommended it to me, and I suddenly got the urge to play a Mario game. I looked up Origami King thinking it was on sale, but I'd missed the sale, and I was thinking, what shall I play? And then I remembered I had Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle in my Switch backlog. And I have to say, I've been having such a good time with it. It really is living up to the recommendations that I've had to play it in the past. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from a Mario Universe kind of strategy battle game, but it's just brilliant. It has all of the atmosphere of a traditional Mario game, and it has all of those little signifiers that we're used to, like the going through a red ring and collecting the red coins before they all vanish, using pipes to find secrets, and all those kinds of things. So I've been having a blast with Mario and Rabbids, and I'm gonna keep on playing that one, and I might well come back and talk about that later too. But before I get into the conversation with Brad, I will also mention that this show is patron supported. So if you enjoy this episode, if you're a first-time listener who likes what you hear today, or if you're a long-time listener, you can show your appreciation for the podcast at patreon.com/gaminginthewild, where for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to the show's Discord, talk to me and some other listeners and friends, get weekly sale recommendations, get occasional extra episodes. So I'd like to give a big thank you to all of my patrons, and you're welcome to join them. That's patreon.com/gaminginthewild. And with that out of the way, let's move on to this special guest episode with Brad Gallaway talking about The Longing. Okay, so I'm very happy to be joined this week by a special guest, Brad Gallaway. the editor of GameCritics.com and co-host of the So Videogames podcast. Hello, Brad.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thanks very much for making the time. I appreciate it. I was just looking at your Game Critics author profile today and noticed that you do an article each month about all the games you played.
Yeah, I just started that last year. I was really inspired, really mostly by my former podcast co-host, Corey Motley, dear friend of mine. He kept a list going, and I was just really impressed he was able to do that. You know, as gamers, I mean, I think, maybe I'm making an assumption, but I think we all kind of tend towards lists and numbering and ranking and things like that. But I had never done something as comprehensive as what he did. So I decided I'm going to try that. So I did it all last year, did all 12 months, and I'm on track to do it again this year.
Yeah, and looking at that list makes me especially grateful that you've made time to come on the show, because it's quite a list. It looked like 31 for July, right? Which means a game a day.
Yeah, I basically average about a game a day and of course, you know, I don't finish most of those because some of them are just quick looks, or maybe they don't suit my taste, or, you know, maybe it's just something I'm just trying as a favor to somebody so I can talk about it a little bit. And we cover a lot of games on the So Videogames podcast, and most of those we do not finish, and we're very open about that. We tell people up front, you know, how much time we put in, and you can look at our stats at Game Critics too. But I love to get out there and check out the games and see what's going on, and if I do find something delicious, I do like to finish it.
Right, we both got through Death's Door recently. I heard that was one of the ones that made the Brad Gallaway nope test of not noping out of a game.
Yeah, that is true. It started out really strong, although I got to be honest with you, I thought it was going to fail out at the very end. I got pretty frustrated in the 11th hour of that game, and I was tempted to put it down, but I had gone that far. You know, the sunk cost fallacy. I got to just push on, and I did finish it. So yes, we do have that in common.
Yeah. Well, I was wondering if you could start by just telling the listeners a little bit about GameCritics.com and about your gaming history and the path that brought you where you are today. Sure.
Gosh, what a story, huh? I guess I've been at Game Critics probably about 21 years now. I think, yeah, that sounds about right, 21 years. So I was around when the dinosaurs were roaming the earth in terms of the internet. But it's a nonprofit, volunteer only. Everybody who works at Game Critics is a volunteer. We only do it because we love it. So there's no money involved, which I think is great because there's not really a lot of money in games writing anyway. So I guess we don't have to have a lot of heartburn about how little we're making. We just do it for the fun and for the love. We started originally with two guys. The owner was Chi Kong Liu and his friend Dale Weir. They started it as kind of an analog to Siskel and Ebert back then. And a lot of people don't know this, but back in the day, when we began, we had to have two reviews for every single game. So kind of like a Siskel Ebert, you know, he said and he said sort of a thing. But we quickly figured out that was very tough to keep up because we needed to get two copies of every game because we didn't, you know, we were not living geographically close to each other. So we couldn't just like share games on physical media back then. And, you know, you can't just like send a game to somebody. So with that problem cropping up and also just the time, and a lot of us just didn't like the games that the other people were playing. And so we didn't want to spend a time spending, you know, like playing something that wasn't fun for us. So we dropped the two-man perspective, although really interesting. I kind of want to get back to it, and we do second opinions sometimes, but then we switched to being a more traditional games review site, and we've been doing that for all these years. We look at all sorts of stuff, and we have a pretty wide diversity of writers, although we're always looking for more. If there's any writers out there who'd like to try their hand, you're always welcome to come and shoot me an email. You can see my email at the website, and we've just been doing that. So for me personally, I am an older dude. I am 46 right now, and I've been playing ever since probably age 5. So, you know, do the math right there. That's a good number of years. Started out with like arcades, if anybody knows what those are. Atari 2600, Vectrex, that kind of stuff. And just been playing ever since. It just connected with me. And although we did not have a lot of money when I was coming up, we were always kind of tight on dollars. We always found a way to make it work. I rented a lot of games back when you could still do that. Walk into like a video store, if anybody knows what those were. We're going to be doing a lot of like archival research right here. We're talking about a lot of like, you know, long time ago. This is going to be like mythology to a lot of people, I'm sure. But, you know, we did that a lot and just played just every new console that came out. It would somehow, you know, it'd work a little extra, or I'd find some way to get enough money to get the console, and we'd play, and just just been doing. I love it. I love games like just about more than anything. So I'm really glad to be able to do something that lets me continue that love.
It's interesting that you have that two-person format in the history. I didn't know that, but it kind of leads on to the way that you and your co-host Carlos are on So Videogames, because you kind of often play the same things and both have opinions about them, but you often have pretty different opinions about them. And it's something that I enjoy about the chemistry that you two have on your show, is that you're able to kind of come to the table with very different takes and to kind of peacefully kick around the disagreements and work through them. It's kind of cool, especially like in the last little period we've had where things have become quite divided out there, to hear two people just working through their differences really nicely.
Oh, thank you. I mean, number one, thanks for listening. I really appreciate having you as a listener. I love your show, by the way, and I listen to it as often as I can. So it's great that we can just have this love fest going on right here. That's good. But yeah, it's tough because Carlos and I are very different in terms of our gaming tastes. I mean, I think that's probably pretty obvious if you listen to a couple episodes. Very rare that we settle on the same game, but we do try to do it because I think there's some value in that, right? Like having two people give their perspective. And, we do disagree. Like we disagree like probably more often than we do agree, but I am proud that we are both like committed to the show and committed to each other as friends and as people who love games. And so regardless of whether I love something and he doesn't or vice versa, we always try to just talk it out and hear each other out. And at the heart of it all, just try to make it funny and entertaining. So I don't think that we've ever like had a real like fight or anybody's gotten really mad on the show. And I think I'm really proud of that because anger is something we've got too much of, and disagreement is something we've got too much of. So I hope that maybe we can just set a standard, and for people who disagree, we can try to get along.
Yeah, you do a very good job of it, and it makes for a really amiable listen. It's definitely part of my weekly routine when I get to Friday evening. A new So Videogames drops, and it's kind of my easing into the weekend, listen to you two while I'm cooking and enjoy the show every week.
Aw, thank you.
But we were going to talk about a specific game that we've both been playing on this episode, which is The Longing. But before we dive into that, I thought I'd ask you like a general question, because I kind of was aware that, like everyone, you were struggling for a while to get your hands on the next-gen consoles, but have managed to get a PS5 and a newer Xbox as well, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So I was wondering, now that you've had a little bit of time to settle in with them, what are you making of the new generation so far, and where has your gaming time been?
Okay, so that's a really interesting question. I will say that probably the vast majority of my time is on the Switch. I really love the Switch more than anything because I love indies, I love 2D games, I love small experiences. And I think that the Switch just excels at that. I think they've got so many great games. I was also a big fan of the Vita when the Vita was around. I still love the Vita. We'll love it always. But it feels like that same spirit is continuing in the Switch, and I'm here for it. I absolutely love it. I know that some people are, expressing some concern that, there's not enough first party titles and what's Nintendo going to do? But it's like, honestly, there's my backlog on the Switch is a couple hundred games deep right now, and there's just more every single day. And I feel like if you can't find something to play on the Switch, you're intentionally not trying. There's so much there. Of course, it doesn't do well at the giant AAA, special effects blockbusters, but I don't think it needs to. I'm really glad that we have that space available where smaller games, indie games, unique games can thrive, and I feel like the Switch is where it's at. So that's my number one thing. But to specifically answer your question, I wasn't trying to dodge you there. I do have both the PS5 and the Xbox X is the one that I have. And I have to say, I really love the Xbox more, which is kind of a flip because last generation, I was PS4 all the way. Did not care for the Xbox One, not even a bit. I think I probably put maybe, I don't know, less than 100 hours on the Xbox One, like total over the lifetime of its being available, right? Which is nothing at all, especially for a game critic like me. Barely anything. But that is totally flipped. Number one, because I feel like some of the features that I really liked in the PS5 are not there anymore. And I feel as though the attitudes of the publishers have changed. When the Xbox One was, had this crazy launch. I was there at Microsoft when they launched it that day. I was fortunate enough to cover it in person. I remember everybody feeling very confused about it plays TV, but you're also doing fantasy football, and where are the games and what's going on? And, it got off to this crazy launch, and it had a very corporate feel where they weren't really taking into account the wants of gamers. And the PS4 was opposite of that. They were really playing it up like, we're about the games and we're about what you like, and we know how that's going. That seems to have flipped again. where Xbox is now saying, yes, we know you want your old games. We know you want backwards compatibility. You know, you want the indies. We know you want Game Pass, where we're giving you like the best value in gaming right now. It's like an incredible deal. We're giving you all this stuff, and we're not talking about fantasy football. We're not talking about using it as a cable box. We're talking about the games. And that's what I want to see as someone who's a lifelong gamer, right? But when you look at the PS5, I mean, they've got the exclusives, which is great. You know, stuff like Returnal or Ratchet and Clank or, you know, anything like that, which is wonderful. And I love their exclusives. But I feel like they've kind of swung to the corporate side now, where they're not really doing great with backwards compatibility. Honestly, I don't like the way the PS5 looks. It's too big. I don't have a real good place to put it. It doesn't fit on my shelf. And so I'm like, you know, I'm just not going to do that. Like, none of their streaming services have really taken off. They don't really seem to be taking that into account. And I don't know what they're going to do to keep up with Game Pass, which I think is obviously the thing to beat right now. So, I mean, we switched. My family, I'll tell you a little bit of a trivia about me. I am a lifelong gamer. My wife is a lifelong gamer, and my son, who is 12, I mean, he's a lifelong gamer, obviously. I mean, you can't not be in my house. And we all have our own gaming setup. So, like, he has an Xbox, I have an Xbox, and my wife has an Xbox, and we all just, like, play in the same room together. We face different directions so that we're not staring at each other's screen. So we kind of, like, have our backs to each other, sort of, but we're in the same room, we're talking to each other, we're being really social. It's, like, good family time. We're often giving each other advice or, like, watching what somebody else is playing. So we do that a lot. And like last generation, we were PS4 all the way, like 3 PS4s, 3 TVs. We were going at it. And that's what we like to do. And now it's like, it's totally flipped. Like, we're Xbox house all the way, like Game Pass all in. And that's just where we feel comfortable. So it's really changed.
Right. I feel the same, actually. It seems like, I mean, console wars are pretty boring, but it's kind of part of the spectator sport of being into games is just watching what everyone's doing and having thoughts about it, right? And so, like, PS5 was the one that everyone wanted. It was the one that was sold out everywhere and the one that everyone was fighting to get and has sold more. But, I mean, the funny thing for me was that at the same time as I got a PS5, a patron of the show had upgraded from his Xbox One to an Xbox Series X and volunteered to just send me his old Xbox One because I never cover Game Pass games on the podcast. And so he sent me over an Xbox One, and I signed up for Game Pass. And the funny thing is that I got a last-gen Xbox at the same time as my shiny next-gen PS5. And I've spent so much more time on the Xbox, even though it's last-gen, because of Game Pass. I've been playing so many games.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it such a great deal? I love it.
It really is. And it's like I feel that the curation of what they put on there is very, very good. It really is. It feels like you get like 4 or 5 really good indies, no matter what your taste might be, and a couple of big games every month, and they just tie a ribbon on it, and there you go.
Oh, I agree.
Whereas over on PS Now and PS Plus, you're kind of getting these kind of, 50-50 games or games that no one seems to really care about, and they have got the exclusives, and they will continue to get them. I can't wait for some of the big games coming to PlayStation, but Game Pass has been a real eye-opener.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I mean, I think Microsoft, it kind of got off to kind of a sketchy start, but they picked up steam, and they really are dialed in on what people want. Of course, in the discourse, there's always a bunch of people who are like kind of poo-pooing Game Pass, but I really feel like those people are out of touch, because if you talk to anybody who is not like the hardest of the hardcore gamers, like maybe you and I are, but like my son, he just likes to play a bunch of games, and every month on Game Pass, there's like, 5, 10, 20 new games coming in. And like you said, the curation is excellent. Like, maybe you don't like everything there, but you're going to like a couple of those things. And even if you don't know that you like them, at least you're being exposed to those so you can give them a try, and maybe you will like them. My son did not know that he ever liked SimCity type games until they started popping up on Game Pass. And when he tried one, he's like, oh my God, I love this. And it's like his new favorite genre. And he probably would have never tried it because I wouldn't have bought it for him without knowing he would have liked it, right? Because like, if you're going to pay 50, 60 bucks, you're not going to do that unless you're really convinced you're going to like it. You don't gamble that much money. At least I don't. I mean, maybe rich people do. Who knows, right? I can't speak for everybody. But in our house, we wouldn't gamble 60 bucks unless I was convinced. But with Game Pass, he's able to try, SimCity or City Skyline or whatever. And he's like, oh my God, this is like my new favorite thing. And so, okay, great. Like, we found that out, and that was wonderful. And it only costs, the $15 a month or whatever it is. So I love that. Same thing for my wife. Like, she's trying so many games that she might not play. And from a game enthusiast perspective, I think that's wonderful. I mean, it's a great value, sure, but just having people open to all these other things that they never would have been exposed to, all these different genres, all these different like styles, art styles, like different ideas. I think just having that accessible to people where they don't have to be scared that they're going to buy one game and not like it and not have enough money to buy a game until the next month, like taking that fear away is awesome. And I think that itself is going to do a lot to really advance the medium forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel the same, even as a fairly staunch indie enthusiast myself. Like, I can't buy everything, so I tend to focus on, a few games that I'm after each month or whatever. But coming onto Game Pass, seeing games like Carrion and Carto and Chris Tales, all the C's there, but I'm just going through my library in my mind. But those are the kind of games that I had an interest in, but not quite enough to push me over the edge to buy them. But they all pop up on Game Pass, so it's like they're getting the kind of the acclaimed titles that you might want to try and just putting them all in one place. Big fan.
Oh, I am such a big fan. I mean, honestly, since we've gotten our Xboxes in the house, I think, I don't count because I'm a game critic. I'm like the outlier, like extreme, right? But like in terms of my son and my wife, they are big time game players, and I don't think that either one of them has bought anything significant since we've got our Xbox, because Game Pass has offered so much. So I'm happy to still support the industry. We'll buy something if we need to, but like so far, neither one has expressed an interest. Like there's more than enough to keep them happy. So I mean, I'm glad to just pay for those monthly subscriptions, and they're fine, So that's great. And if Microsoft at any point could just directly deposit all the money that they paid me to say all these nice things about Game Pass, I mean, I'm ready to accept those funds.
It's interesting that we both ended up switching lanes, and me going back a generation to do so.
Yeah, that's incredible. That is incredible, honestly.
But after all of that Sony and Xbox talk, ironically, the game that we are going to talk about today, we both played on Switch, I believe.
Yes, absolutely.
So the Switch is still holding its own.
I love the Switch so much.
Me too. I go through phases with them all, to be honest. I'm kind of leaning back into my Switch lately. But the game that we are going to talk about today, that we're going to focus on, is called The Longing. It is by Studio Soifs, I believe you pronounce it. I did actually even Google that. It came out on 2020 for Mac, Windows, and Linux. It came out 2021 for Switch. I think the way that it came to most people's attention was when it was featured in a Nintendo Direct, an Indie World Direct, where suddenly it was on everyone's screens and we were all very curious about this game. You may have heard about it before because you pay... your eyes are close to the Matrix on what's coming out. But to me, it was a new title. So I actually didn't buy it at first. And then a friend of mine, Ashley, recommended it to me. He listens to Gaming in the Wild, and he said, this you should really give this one a try. It's up your street. But the developer describes it as an indie point-and-click adventure idle video game in which you follow a creature called a Shade who waits 400 days to awaken a sleeping king. And I tend to I'm always fascinated to read the way that devs describe their own games and then do a little description myself. And I've described it as a melancholic exploration game in which you control a Shade through an abandoned underground realm as he ponders his existence and the passing of time.
Can I just fanboy out for a second here? I just want to stop you for a moment. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but like when you summarize those games, that's probably one of my favorite parts of your show. Like every time, like because you do your own summary, and I love hearing what you come up with, and it's always like really on point. And one of the things I love about your show is like you have such a keen insight to some things. So when you do that little capsule, that's one of my favorite things. I just want to give you praise for that.
Thank you very much. I mean, as a writer myself and a journalist for a long time, I always find it absolutely fascinating how people are going to take the kind of the whole holistic picture of their own game, which they've worked on for years. And I think it's quite tough to get it down into just that little pipette drop of a few sentences and really nail it. I always find it really interesting how the developers decide what words they use and what genres they summon up to describe their game. It must be quite a task when you've put so much time into something.
Oh, I agree. And I bet, as soon as they turn in their final copy, they probably want to rewrite it 5 minutes later and then rewrite it 5 minutes again.
Right. I do think that game developers that publish their games via Devolver are the luckiest of all, because whoever is writing those biographies over at Devolver is just killing it. They're always so funny and so good and so kind of casual and light the way that they write them.
Oh, that is for sure. Devolver is a very special publisher. They have a very strong presence. And I think that's been really beneficial to them, because when you say Devolver, I mean, I'm sure most people listening to this podcast know exactly what you mean by that. So it's great that they've got that identity going.
It really is. But The Longing has a rating of 79 on Metacritic, which is pretty good actually, considering the kind of the challenging and unusual nature of the game. How Long to Beat has it at 20 hours for the story, 29 hours for extras, and 67 hours for completionists, which made me raise an eyebrow, I have to say. I think I looked at my Switch just before we talked, and my playthrough hasn't yet hit the 10-hour barrier, having rolled credits on the game. So I got through the whole thing in 10 hours. I was wondering how much time you spent on this one in total, if you have a rough idea, or your Switch nearby.
Well, gosh, that would have been something good to look up, but I do not know exactly. But I will say I did a completionist run. I did literally everything that was possible to do in the game. And when I got done with it all, I don't know exactly how the Switch is keeping track because, of course, maybe people don't know this. We haven't talked about it yet on the show. But, you can leave your Switch idle for a long time. So maybe you go play something else while the logging is doing its own thing. So by the time I had done literally everything in the game, I still had more than 300 hours left to go on the in-game clock. So if the game starts out, I'm sorry, days is what I meant to say, excuse me. So if the game's opening premise is that you have to spend 400 days, I had done literally everything and still had 300 left to go. So by the end of the game, I was just checking in once a week, letting the clock run out. So I had plenty of time left to go.
Right, and I guess the kind of the hook of this game and the unusual thing about it is that the game lasts 400 days of real time. It has a real-time clock. When you start the game, you have 400 days on the clock, and it starts ticking down second by second by second. And when you close the game, that clock keeps running. And so I think it was something that caught my attention, and from hearing you and Carlos talk about it on the show, yours as well, such an interesting setup that the game clock is running all the time, even when you're not playing it. But something that becomes apparent through this game, in which you play this little shade, an underground realm, sort of flip-flopping around like a little golem, kind of passing the time and waiting for the moment to come when you awaken the king again, is that it becomes apparent over time that there are things that you can do. You find bits of paper, you find crayons that you can paint with, or paints, different kind of pigments that you can use, and you find coal that you can burn in the stove of your tiny little cave. And when you start doing those things, the clock starts to tick a little faster. And so this game seems to me to be like pretty philosophical in its kind of root. It's about kind of existence and about the way that time passes and how you fill time. And one of my favorite things about it was the shade as he's walking around this big cave, slowly kind of creeping around the caves. He kind of talks to himself a little bit and talks to you. And he talks about kind of, I wonder if I'm going to get through this. And kind of he just has his little thoughts. And the fact that time speeds up as you kind of find more things to amuse him or find books to read, that will speed up time. If you light a fire in the stove, that will speed up time. And in the kind of existential scenario of this game, it's almost like how does one fill up time in life? And I get the feeling that the people behind this probably kind of, it's a German studio, and we all saw the developer of it do his little speech on the Indie World Direct. Seems like quite a serious guy, but the way that it handles those themes was something really unusual, I thought.
Oh, I agree, and I think you're exactly right. Like, I remember when I first started finding some of the pieces of paper or the crayons or whatever. There's other things he can do. I think I read a book, and he'll say, oh, like he'll physically see time go by faster. Like the clock will speed up, and the player can see the seconds go by instead of increments of 1, they'll go by in increments of 5 or 7 or 10 or something. So you'll see the effect. So I definitely agree. That's a really clever way to go, a really clever mechanic, because of course, if you have to get through 400 real-time days and How Long to Beat is saying it takes you 10 hours to get through it, I mean, obviously there's got to be a way to kind of, quote unquote, cheat that clock a little bit. So you can definitely compress time. And I do think that's a pretty great way of summing it up, where if you fill your time with things you enjoy, with things that keep you busy, that with entertainment and positive things, then time goes by quickly. Although I guess in this case, it's good. I don't know that you want your life to speed by as quickly as that, in the real world. I mean, we don't want to speed our way to the grave, I guess. But I do find it interesting also on the flip side of that I was able to do everything the developer put in, and I still had so much time left. I mean, that was one of my big takeaways from the game, was like, I wish there had been more. I wish there was more for me to do, or more things to look forward to, so that more of that time would have felt like it was fulfilling. And I mean, maybe that was just me, I just being too efficient or something like that. But I think that's also kind of a commentary too. Like, I mean, it is possible to like live a life and just have not enough to fill it. So maybe we have to be a little more active in finding things to do.
Yeah, it sounds like, I mean, you and me were playing this in parallel pretty much, and we kind of tweeted back and forth about it a little bit. And I think that, as you say, if you've kind of methodically searched through the map, the way that I played was that I'd start at the house and just kind of wander out past the king and take a little walk out into the tunnels. And it seems like, I mean, there's even a button that you can press that will just make your shade take a wander and go somewhere random, right?
Yep.
And that's kind of how I played. I kind of followed my nose, and every time I was taking a walk, I was noticing, sure, like I've just passed a door on the left, now I've just passed a door beneath me, and now I've passed 3 more, and then I end up somewhere. But I didn't have the kind of the presence of mind to kind of remember every door that I'd taken and not taken, if you know what I mean. And so that I found that I think I kind of, in the end, I ended up using a map that someone had made online, because I felt like it was such a kind of a labyrinthine environment that it was really easy to miss things. And there are only probably, 15 or 20 at the most, if that, kind of major locations in the game where stuff happens, in inverted commas, right?
Right. No, I totally agree. I started with the same approach you described, kind of just going out there and just like seeing what would happen. But pretty soon I realized, again, like you said, it's labyrinthine. It's very confusing. It's very some of the passageways don't connect the way that you feel like they would connect, and so sometimes you feel like, oh, I took the left door, I'm going to be on the left side, but actually I'm on the right side. And sometimes you'll get twisted around. So luckily I figured out that there was a function in the game where you can get to a specific location and then save that location. The game, I don't think, ever really explains it, or if they do explain it, they do kind of a poor job about it. And that's one of my criticisms of the game overall, is I feel like the tutorialization could be better. I'm sure there's an argument saying that it's experiential and maybe you should find that out for yourself. But at the same time, I don't know, I feel like maybe just explain the basic functions and let me go from there. But once I figured out that you could save a location, meaning that if I found someplace interesting, you go to the menu, click, you like take a little snapshot of it, and then the shade can always find his way back. Even if you don't remember how you got there, the shade will remember. So that really helped me explore more efficiently. So I would get to a place where I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm in the Northwest somewhere. I'm going to take a picture of this. And then when I need to explore some more, I can come right back here. And then if I keep going in the direction I'm going, I'm going to get further. So I was pretty methodical about it. And I tried to like be very, careful about where I was going. And if I was in a place with lots of doors, I would try to go back and forth and see, is this going where I think it's going? Where am I really going? What's happening? And in my head, I was trying to figure it all out, because I think this game is really cool. And I really like the aesthetics of it. I like the theme. I like the tone of it. So I really wanted to wring the most out of it that I could. So I was definitely like digging in a pretty fierce way. So maybe it's not meant to be played so methodically, but that was really where I got the most value out of it. And I'm glad that I did. I really had a good time with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for that hot minute when it first came out, and I was kind of just sort of very taken by it, because like you say, it's got such a strong atmosphere to it. Like the caves that you wander through are all hand-drawn, and they all have this kind of little drops of coal falling from the ceiling and kind of running water, and the parts where they get really dark and glowing mushrooms and all of this stuff. It's kind of a magical little world that's going on there. But I think that as I was kind of wandering around and realizing that I wasn't going to be able to hold all of this stuff in my mind, I did use that functionality you talk about a little bit of saving a location and going back there. But yeah, I mean, the question of kind of quality of life in the longing, it's almost it's almost like they've intentionally taken a left at every turn where quality of life was in the right direction,
Oh, God.
For example,
yes.
Your pet peeve of the game, I know, is the walking speed, which is kind of confrontationally slow.
That is a perfect way to describe it. Yes, it is aggressively slow. It is sadistically slow. It is terrible, but I love confrontationally slow. That's excellent.
Right, because your little shady, the walking speed is probably the quarter of the normal walking speed of a character in this game. He just trudges incredibly slowly. And so you kind of click on the screen and you just sit and watch him walk for 30 seconds before he gets to the next door, right? And so that first flush of exploration is kind of tempered by the fact that you're really being pulled back by the speed that the game has. And I guess when it comes to the quality of life issues, it does feel like it's almost like they're trolling the player. For example, that kind of automatic functionality that's supposed to make your life much easier. So now you can come back to an interesting spot and you can explore from there again. What that actually equates to is that the place you save becomes a tiny little square, just a little tiny miniature Polaroid about the size of a little fingernail on the screen. And that is your best hope at navigating the game in an organized fashion.
Oh, you're not wrong. And I agree. I mean, people who have not played this game, I assure you, you cannot conceive of how slow this character walks. It is the slowest walking speed I have ever encountered in any game in my life. And when I try to describe it, it defies description because you simply cannot imagine how slow this guy walks. So that is a big problem. And in fact, it drove me so crazy at first. I actually emailed the developer and the publisher who was handling it, and I'm like, is this a bug? Is this a problem? Do I get like speed shoes at some point or something? Because this is driving me up the wall. And they're like, nope, that's how it is. You can't speed it up, and that's it. So once I made peace with that, it was difficult. But part of the game is that you can direct the shade to do something, and he'll keep doing it even when the game is closed. And that was really the only way that game was playable. For example, if I knew that I was going to be walking someplace like far off to the east or the west or whatever, and I knew, okay, well, it's going to take him at least 30 or 40 minutes to walk there. In real time, I would say, Shade, go walk to location X. And then once he started walking, you close the switch and go do something else. So I had to get in the habit of checking the game maybe once or twice a day. Oh, yeah, that's right. Yesterday I told you to go east. And now that it's the next day, you're there. Okay, so now that I've played 10 other games in the meantime, I'll come back to this one. And then we'll do that thing that I wanted to do, and then I will check in with you tomorrow. Like, I had to get in the zone with that. And I got to be honest with you, I'm not great with patience, although I am improving. Number one, because I'm older. Number two, because I've got a kid and a wife. But, I will say one thing that I credit my patience to, and we're going to take a little bit of a divergence here. I apologize in advance, is playing Marvel Puzzle Quest. Have you ever played Marvel Puzzle Quest on like Android or iPhone, anything like that?
No. Okay.
I don't recommend it unless you are willing to like give away part of your life. But it's a match 3 game starring Marvel characters, like Iron Man, Captain America, whatever. And it like many of these match 3 games, they have microtransactions and some stuff unlocks over time. And it's a really fun game. I really like it a lot. But you have to be patient in the game. You cannot rush anything in that game. Like it moves at its own pace. You can't just jump to the end. You can't. I mean, even money is not going to jump you ahead where you want to go. Like you just have to be patient. And I've been playing this game probably for 6 years. It is the game
where they lock it up so that you can only play so much in any given day.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
Right.
Yes. So there's time limits to it, and there's sorts of unlocks that happen. Some things are just time gated. I mean, we don't have to get too far into it, but I played this game probably every day for the last 6 or 7 years, and having that daily experience of, I like this game a lot. I want to play more of this game, but I can only play this much, and now I got to put it down, has trained my brain to be more receptive to patience. And so I really credit Marvel Puzzle Quest for teaching me to be a more patient person. And I don't know that I would have gotten through the longing if I hadn't already built up my tolerance.
Right. I mean, I think the closest I've come to something like that is I kind of missed out on the whole Animal Crossing craze that was going on, or the Animal Crossing New Horizons craze that was going on last year when everyone was playing it online and everyone was kind of sharing their progress and checking in every day and doing their tasks. And I've never really clicked with a game of that type, I have to say. I did play a little bit of Cozy Grove this year. Okay. And I mean, it was kind of like a small miracle for me that I managed to do it for about 2 weeks when I checked in every day and did my tasks, because my attention span just seems to skitter off towards new games or kind of get obsessed with like a good juicy single player campaign or something that I can really get my teeth into and kind of play at my own pace. And so I really struggled with that aspect of the longing because, as you say, it's a game that you kind of have to. It has to click with the way that you play. And for me, it was like it was asking me to play games in a way that I'm really not familiar with, to be remembering to pick up my Switch and open the longing, to then tell my Shade to go and do something and close it again. I think probably over half the times that I opened the longing and remembered to do it, my Shade was lying in some place that I'd left him a week ago. and he woke up and I was like, oh God, I feel terrible about this. And then I'll send him off to another part of the map where I've got a vague inkling that there was something there, where a spider was building a web maybe, or where I was waiting for moss to grow so that I could jump down. Because you literally just have to wait in-game weeks to do some of those things. Oh, yes. So I'd open it up, I'd send him back to wherever the moss was, close it again, and then go away and complete, No Man's Sky or something in the meantime. And then come back and open it again, and then he wakes up again, and now he's by the moss. And I never really found that rhythm of kind of checking in regularly that allowed me to kind of fully explore it.
It's not something that as gamers we're really keen on or really trained to do. I mean, I think Animal Crossing is probably the biggest exception. But I mean, to its credit, with Animal Crossing, there's other stuff that you can do. So maybe you'll finish your assigned task for the day, but you can still run around and get bugs in your bug net, or you can still fish, or there's always something to do. So maybe it kind of keeps you coming back more often. But in something like The Longing, where it's just waiting, like you're simply just waiting for the shade to reach where he's going to, or like you say, like the moss was my first big period where there's a giant cliff and you will not survive the jump. So the shade observes, he says, hey, there's a little patch of moss down there. I bet it'll be big enough in 2 weeks. And he literally means 2 weeks, like actual 2 weeks. So that was the first part at which I was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess I'll come back in 2 weeks. And I did. And the moss was great. But, we're not used to having the sense of there is literally nothing else I can do in this game. Like that doesn't happen very often. It's a very unique, very brave, very challenging stance to take. And I can honestly not think of very many games that do it. Like not even Animal Crossing. I think the only other thing, in my mind anyway, that is comparable is probably Seaman. Did you ever play Seaman on the Dreamcast?
I have not, no.
So Seaman, for those who don't know, was on the Sega Dreamcast many, many moons ago. And it was kind of like a sim. An incredible game, honestly. I've never really played anything like it, where you had a pet. Starts out as an egg. You hatch the egg. Your TV screen looks like an aquarium. And so you had a little microphone that attached to your controller. And this is the Dreamcast. This is like a while ago, so we're not talking cutting-edge technology, right? It's amazing they were able to do this. You would hatch the egg. It would turn into like a little tadpole. And like what you could do was you could feed it. And you could tap on the glass. And you could wait. Like, that's it. You couldn't do anything else. So you just were stuck there watching it. And so you had such limited interactions with it. Like, it forced you to go do something else because no one in the right mind would sit there for hours and wait for something to happen because it was so boring. But when something did happen, it was like incredible because it was like a really good contrast to all of the boredom that you just got through. Kind of the way that I felt about The Longing as well, where you can have hours and hours and hours of literally nothing happening walking through hallways and you're just bored out of your mind. But then you come across a new room and you find something lying on the floor and you're like, oh my God, it's the thing that I was looking for, or it's the last piece to my musical instrument, or it's that last crystal that I needed. And you're like so happy because you've been so bored for like hours that when you get something, that little change, that little bit of reward, it feels like phenomenal in comparison.
Right. It has that strange reward system. And I think like, as you were saying about Animal Crossing and about these kind of games in general, is that they're kind of fighting to keep the player's attention a lot of the time. And so it seems like a game like Animal Crossing or Cozy Grove, it's like, okay, here's your kind of half hour or hour of like game for today. And sure, you can run around and do other stuff and you can go fishing. But it's like, it's trying to kind of, as most video games do in this kind of really crowded entertainment environment, where they're vying for your attention with Netflix and with Life and with all of the other game systems that you probably own, there is this focus on keeping the player in the grasp of the game and being addictive. And something that's so interesting about The Longing is that it takes that received wisdom and that kind of, I would say, probably commercial imperative and just kind of design philosophy of making a game that will hold the player's attention. And it just turns around in a 180 and just goes screaming off towards the horizon.
It does not care. It really does not care what you think. Doesn't care if you come back. It does not care. It's very brave, is one way to say it. I mean, there's probably other ways to describe it that are slightly less kind, but yeah, it really doesn't care.
Yeah. And so again, it comes down to the idea of it being, as much as it is a game, and it's a little game where you run around, and I'm not the kind of person to say what is and isn't a game. They're all games. I'm not going to say that one is and one isn't because it doesn't fulfill my criteria. But this game has definitely got more than a dash of this kind of slight eyebrow-raised, kind of philosophical look and slight player trolling that just makes me so curious about it. So for all of the kind of the difficulties of playing this game that I've been describing, about trying to fit it into the way that my attention span works and the way that I play games, and failing to a large degree, I don't think I completed it like you did. I maybe got 70% of the stuff. I still am fascinated by The Longing. There's something about it. There's something about the way that the developers have just kind of cast off all of that traditional wisdom of trying to keep your attention and made something so strange that it's a very intriguing game. Whether I love it or like it is a different matter, but I'm fascinated by it either way.
I totally agree. I mean, being the gamer who's been around the block like me, and I've been there, I've done it all, I've seen it all, I've played everything 10 times. For me at this point in my gaming career, I'm always most interested by novelty or by original ideas or by people exploring new spaces or doing something different, right? And regardless of anything else you could say about The Longing, you got to admit it is in a league of its own. It is out in left field, so far out. I don't even know how they got there. It does its own thing. It has its own ideas, its own pace, its own philosophy. And I found that so engaging to me. Like, it was so different. It was so bold. It didn't care what I felt about it. It was just there, and I could either take it on its own terms or I could not. And I found that to be really interesting. I really wanted to engage with it. And as frustrating as it was to engage on it on its own terms, because there is simply no other choice, I really wanted to see what it had to say. Like, I wanted to know what this developer's thoughts were, what his ideas were, what were the themes he was going to be unraveling. Why did you do these choices, which feel so unfriendly to the player? What are you trying to tell me? What is your end goal? I really felt like, and honestly, I think that was really what drove me through it, right? Because it doesn't fit really the way that I usually play. It's slow, it's difficult, it's frustrating, it's unyielding. I mean, it's so hard to get anywhere. It's so hard to do anything. It takes so long. It's just you're burning your lifespan playing this game, right? But I felt like it was so different that I had to get to the end of it, and I really wanted the entire measure of it, because this is something that's so unique. It's absolutely worth a look, if for no other reason than it is so unique. I mean, in this field where, I mean, as an editor of a games website, I'm not even exaggerating. I get probably 30, 40, 50 emails a day, at least, about new games that are coming. Like, I can just sit here and I just watch them come in my inbox. New game after new game after new game, early access, this is in beta, this is in demo, please check out our game. And so many of them are just like instantly forgettable. And I don't say that to like disparage anybody, but like when you've been playing games, and as many games as I have over the years, it's like, oh yeah, this is just like these 10 other games I've already played, and oh, this looks like a variation of something I played last year, and this looks just like another iteration of something else. To see something like The Longing come through, where it's just like punches you in the face because it is so different and is so just like standoffish, like I had to get to the bottom of that.
Mm-hmm. Right, and I'm thinking that maybe we've talked about it without spoiling anything major. I think maybe the only thing that could be considered a spoiler is the fact that you can speed up time. So apologies if anyone's listening that didn't want to know that and come in completely blank. But I think it might be interesting to take a little kind of spoiler warning and to discuss the endings that we got for this game. I assume that some of the people that are listening to this episode will have found it because they're searching for The Longing on podcast formats or whatever, or they want to hear people talking about this game because it is that kind of game.
Oh yes.
Some of the most listened to, it seems like the most listened to Gaming in the Wild episodes are these kind of games that have ideas. It's like the Disco Elysium, The Last of Us 2, the Kentucky Route Zero, the Outer Wilds. It's these games that leave you with a big question mark afterwards. And I go and seek out people talking about those kind of games too, because I want to hear what their experience was and what their thoughts are about them. And this is one of those games. So maybe if we take a little spoiler warning now, from here on in, we're going to be talking about the endings that we got and some late game stuff.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'd love to. Absolutely.
All right, then. So that's a final warning for any listeners that want to go and try it. Have you got any parting thoughts that you'd like to give to someone who's bowing out now about The Longing?
I would say that if you like independent games, different games, unique experiences, it's absolutely worth checking out. Even if you end up not clicking with it, maybe it's not your thing. It is just so wildly out there. If you like the fringe or people exploring new space in video games, it's worth it just for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say the same. I mean, if you're a fan of arty indie games, if you're a fan of different experiences, if you like to see people pushing the medium, whether you'll click with this game or not, I would say it's worth picking up just to try it, because it is a one-off, and in this crowded games environment, that in itself is high praise.
Agreed.
So, final warning, from here on out, it's spoilers. So, for me, we played this game quite differently. I played really heavily in that first period and explored a large part of the map, and then really, really tailed off and remembered about the game a long time later, having kind of had a few kind of false starts of trying to get back into it. And I actually tweeted out, like, oh God, it's time. I opened The Longing, the clock was at 0, And I tweeted out to people, should I wake the king or should I keep on playing? I didn't find some of the stuff yet. I didn't find the face of the caves, and I didn't find the way into the library, and these things that were kind of on the back of my mind. And Carlos actually tweeted me back, and he was like, "Oh God, it's my turn too. I can go and open the."
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah, and so I decided to, as much as I was dying to just wake the king up and just end the longing, I decided to go back and do a few things. So I looked up that user map, and I went and talked to the face of the caves, and I found my way into the library. I ticked those last few things off. I went back up to the very top of the play area, where there is this kind of mysterious network of tunnels that just seemed to be calling to me. But I came up to a dead end. My spider friend had died.
Oh no!
And I came back down to see the king, woke him up, and the ending of the game that I got was that the king is like, "Hey, thanks for waking me up. I've decided to end everything," and collapsed the entire cave network. And so the poor little shade, having waited for his 400 days, was buried back amongst his coal brothers and sisters, as he likes to call them. And that was kind of that. It was a very abrupt ending. It felt like it didn't quite do that kind of closing of the circle that I'd been perhaps expecting, because the big reveal of who is the king and what's he going to say is it's very much the big question of the game, what lies at the end of this game. And so for me, it was a very abrupt ending, and I was a little disappointed by it. I did look up alternative endings, and I know that there are a few. I know that apparently you can get out the top and you can try and stage your escape, and maybe never wake the king. But I was wondering, that was my ending. I was a little disappointed by it, I have to say. But what was your experience like of the end of this game?
Well, I mean, pretty similar to yours. I woke up the king as well. I wonder if there's variations on it, because I don't remember him collapsing the cave network. He kind of just said, "I'm going to end the world, and thank you for being so faithful. I will let you live in the world, and it's just going to be the two of us in nothingness for eternity. So I guess thank you." That also, to me, felt very unsatisfying. I mean, apparently this game is somewhat based in folklore of the region where it's from. I'm not familiar with this legend, the king under the earth or whatever. I'm not familiar with that. So maybe this is expected if you were from that culture. I had no idea what to expect from it. So it did feel very abrupt, and it did feel very too short and unsatisfying. And I have to be honest with you, I was a little bit salty, because after spending so much time with this game and persevering through everything and putting up with the walking speed, you could have put in a little fancier cutscene, a little bit more flash at the end. Something.
Very short, isn't it? It's like under a minute.
Yeah, it's so short. It just feels like you spent no time at all in anything, which I'm a little bit disappointed, a little bit bitter by that. But I chose that ending because that was what made the most sense to me. Because when the game starts, the king says, "I created you for this purpose. You are my servant or my thrall, whatever, and you're going to do this for me." And I'm like, okay, you seem like an okay guy. You gave me life, and here I am in these caves doing this thing. But I kind of wish that the game had given me more of a motivation to explore some of the other endings, because I knew that they were there. I found some of them on accident, and I found some looking on FAQs. And
what did you find? I'm kind of curious.
Well, so there's one where you can kill yourself. There's a cliff where you can just go in the darkness and you can just be like, "I just don't like this life. I don't like being here. I don't like myself. I'm going to end it all." And you can just throw yourself to your death. There's the one, like you said, you can go. There's a well at the very top of the underground complex where there's two different people that visit the well. There's an old man and a boy. And
this is the ending that I wanted, but I never found the well. I just had I had the dreams.
Yeah.
Where the shade sees these people above ground and he's kind of drawn to them. And it was the last thing I did before I woke the king, actually, was try one more time to get to the top. But I think I was supposed to do something with the spider that I didn't do. Maybe you're supposed to grow a second web to get up there, but I was never able to get up there.
Yeah, if you find the spider, you have to dislodge him from his original location, and when you dislodge him, he goes to a new location, builds a new web, and that's you're light enough to climb on the web and get up to where the well is. Mm-hmm. So if you never dislodge the spider the first time, then he dies, I think, apparently after a while, and then he never makes the new web. But if you go up there, there's a couple things. There's the well, and there's the old man and the boy. Each one comes to the well, and depending on which one you go, it can be a good ending or a bad ending. There's also a hidden tower that you can actually go above the surface of the ground and go inside the tower, and you'll see this magician's laboratory that's up there. That's almost impossible to discover, and I gotta say I was a little bit bitter at that point, because As I was up there, you get to this tunnel, and I'm not kidding. Like, you're in the darkness. It is pitch black. There is nothing to see. Your screen is completely black, and you're just walking. And I wasn't even sure if the game was even working. I was like, am I even doing anything? I can't tell what's going on. And I played this game in bed a lot, and my wife is usually sleeping next to me, so I never have the sound on.
That's an existential experience, lying in the dark, staring at a dark screen.
Exactly, right? Like, I'm like, what is even going on? Where's my life going? Why am I doing this? This is crazy. Right. Playing a black screen in the dark in this dark room, like, this is nuts. But I wanted to find it, and there's a sound cue. So I never have the sound on my Switch. Almost never do I have the sound on. And he's just like, footstep, 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 squish. And once you hear that squish, you're supposed to intuitively know, oh, I will walk in a different direction on this completely black screen, which I don't even know which direction I'm going in, and that leads you up to the tower. So I had to find it out on FAQ. I never would have found it on my own. So if you go up to the tower, you find a key, and that leads you to some of the locked doors. There's actually a locked door that appears. I don't know if you know this or not, but there's a locked door that randomly appears once a day. And if you know where it is, you can go there ahead of time, find it, wait for it to appear, go inside. Once you get inside, you get locked inside for a day. You got to come back the next day, get yourself out, and you put together these items that you have to find, and they're all extremely esoteric. I think that most of those were not intuitive, and I had to look up an FAQ for those. So that kind of gets me back to my original point of I didn't really have enough motivation to go for the other endings because the one where you need like the crystal and the key and the tower, those were all so secret. I never would have found those on my own. And I mean, there were some clues, but they were just, to me, not good enough clues. And as far as the killing myself, I wouldn't have wanted to kill myself. That doesn't make any sense. I'm fine playing this game. I don't hate it that much. And about the well,
the Shade is quite sympathetic, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's a nice little, a dark little fellow just scuttling around the holes. You don't want to throw him down a hole.
Exactly. I love that guy. I would not want to kill him. Like, he's so cute, and you feel for him, right? Like his plight. Like you want to see him to the end of it. And as far as the well, it's like I didn't feel like I wanted to escape. I didn't feel like the king was being mean to me. I didn't feel like I was really suffering. And also, how would I even know that those people were there? You get these dreams, but it felt so random, and I wasn't motivated to like really invest in those, and so I didn't pursue that. So the only option left was to wake up the king. So it would have been neat to kind of have motivation or to have more of a moral struggle. Maybe something about the king was bad. Maybe you would have, I don't know, just more motivation to actually pursue the rest of it. But none of it really came together. So I stuck with the original plan, woke up the king, and it was really unsatisfying. I had to look at the rest on YouTube because I'm certainly not going to replay that game again. But, you got there eventually.
Right. So, I mean, even as we're talking about this game as kind of a really interesting work of art in game form, and a game that really pushes boundaries, and a game that really pushes players and trolls players and challenges players, we can still look at it and say, even as a work of art, there are things that I like and don't like about this game. It's not like you're going to kind of slavishly kind of praise every decision because they're all brave or whatever. And I think I agree with you that for the challenge that this game puts in front of you, just in terms of applying your attention to it, even that is a challenge. It's almost like the game is kind of shrugging back from your attention by making you turn it off all the time, come back to it days later, wait 2 weeks to do something in your busy life. Maybe you just don't remember to ever go back. It's like it's placing these barriers in front of you. And it does feel like there is a balance to be found there between exercising that kind of that impulse that these game developers have had and allowing for a player who actually does hang in there to really get into the nooks and crannies of the game and to see what it has to offer. And for me, at least, I feel that I would have really liked to find some of those extra things, and I think I did my time with this game. I do feel like I put enough into it. I put enough into it to deserve those bits of content, those bits of story development, And so a critique that I have of it is that perhaps it's drawn a little too tight in how it allows you into its secrets as a player, and it could have been more generous, even within that framework of being intrinsically ungenerous and hard to untangle. It could have been just a touch easier to let players through.
I absolutely agree, and I think that's a really good point. And I do agree also that, as much as I do like to praise this game on one level, looking at it strictly from like an experiential, personal, taste level, there's lots of stuff that I hate about it that I would change. So it's definitely not all praise. And I agree. I think that an experience like this, simply persevering, I feel like is challenge enough. And so I don't know how many of these elements came into the game. I think some of them got patched in later. Some of them, I think the more secret endings were not part of the original design. And I don't know whether the developer was responding to feedback from players, or maybe he just wanted to add a few extra Easter eggs for people. But I feel like simply remembering to play this game, simply getting through and investing the time, that should have been the ultimate challenge. And the difficulty of hiding some of these secrets so well is that not only is it really hard to find your way around the cave because it's very confusing, it's also really difficult to like try things because your character moves so slowly. So let's say, for example, I had an idea about where to find one of these magical crystals that you need for the super, super secret ending, but I couldn't test out my theory because it would take me 45 minutes to walk there. And in that time, I would go off and do something else, right? So like if maybe if you could get to places quicker and you could iterate on your theory faster and you could try things out, maybe that would be more of a fair challenge to have these secrets be so hidden. But if something is really, really, really hidden and it takes 45 minutes between attempts and it may take you 5, 10, 15 attempts to figure out what you're supposed to do, that's too much of an ask, right? That's crazy. That's an insane level of challenge. So, I mean, I don't necessarily feel bad because I figured out many of the things on my own, which is great. Maybe a quarter of the things or maybe half of the things I needed to look up because I just couldn't invest 10 hours to try something that may not even be the right thing to try. Like, how do I get in this door? Do I need to walk back to point A? Is it point B? Is it point C? Is it something else? And it's 45 minutes between each attempt in real time. That's nuts. So I definitely agree that like the unraveling through time should have been, for me anyway, what would have been the ultimate challenge, and simply having these things unlock over time would have been fine, or having more overt clues that just say, hey, if you do this with enough patience, you'll get there. That would have been fine. But to try to hide things so carefully and so tightly, and just to like the time invested to find those things organically, no, thank you. I am not an infinite being. I will not be on this earth forever. I cannot invest that kind of time on your game.
Right. And I think that particular problem, that specific problem of a developer getting so far into their own game that they took away these little bits here and there and here and there.
Yes.
And then before long, half the game is hidden. Because they've got their head in it all day, every day for literally years, to them it perhaps seems reasonable. Another example of this problem, a game that I really like but suffers from this terribly, is Fez.
Oh my God, Fez.
Which has the front half of that game is just like a fun platforming puzzle game where you spin the world around. It's very satisfying, it's very jolly, it's very aesthetically pleasing. But all the way through the game, you're seeing these little Easter eggs here and there. And then you finish the game, and it turns out that all of those secrets that you were kind of slightly frustrated that you couldn't solve somehow, it turns out that the back half of that game is this kind of Reddit board-centric, like, superfan content, where the only way that you're ever going to be able to do this is to form a team of, like, 50 people and kind of brute force it. And I believe that is actually what happened with the hidden language of Fez.
Yes.
Is that Redditors came together and cracked it themselves, like code breakers, you know. And I think that those kind of games where content gets tucked away incrementally to the point at which there is a large part of the game that it's not reasonably accessible even to a dedicated player. It's my main critique of Fez, which is a game that I actually really like. And I think it's my main critique of The Longing as well. It's like a little too hidden, a little too obfuscated, and it kind of denies even a player with a reasonable amount of impetus and dedication from ever finding it. Like you say, the changing of the footsteps in a long, endless black hole, that's just a step too far, you know.
I'm glad you brought this up because this is a point of irritation that I have with many people in the indie scene specifically. You don't find it too often in bigger games because they focus test this stuff out. They're like, no, this is garbage. We can't do this because we're going to piss off too many people. And in some ways that's a bad thing because sometimes you get some of the originality stripped out. But in other ways, they take away some of the spikes that can really hurt. And I feel like you are absolutely correct. Fez is like a monstrous example of this. And I feel the same way you did. The first half is great. Really loved it. I completely fell away when it got to like the code breaking logic solving stuff. That was like,
oh yeah, same. No
ridiculous.
Doubt.
Yeah, ridiculous. and same thing for this. I kind of feel like after skimming some of the FAQs and stuff, I feel like the developer of The Longing kind of arrived in the same place where they intended for people to discuss, like groups to get together online, trade information. And that's just, I mean, I can't criticize that because maybe some people really like that. I know some people like to do those kind of things, these ARGs of a way. And that's fine. But like, it is definitely like a step too far for most people. And I would have appreciated that when developers are crafting these things, like, give me the lion's share of the experience that I can do, either casually or with some dedication. I feel like I was pretty dedicated to this game, and there were still many things I never would have found out. But that happens a lot in the indie space. Most often, you see it with difficulty spikes, where a developer is playing their own game so often, and they're so good at it that they keep upping the difficulty because it seems normal to them because they've been playing it for 2 years. And
Let's call that the Hollow Knight problem.
Yes, absolutely. 1000% yes. Oh my God, the Hollow Knight. The last boss of Hollow Knight, can we, just for a minute, wow. Okay, too far, guys, too far. So that's usually where it manifests, but I think that actually happened here as well, where this guy was probably in his own head. He knew his game too well. He had probably been talking to the same 5 Redditors who had played his game from beta, and they knew it too well, and so the stakes just keep getting upped. And it's a shame because I feel like a lot of people are not going to organically find these things, and I think it could be a really cool experience where, again, if simply being patient was really the key, but that's not the case here. So it is kind of a shame.
Yes, it is. But I am glad that I tried it. I do want to give a shout out to my friend Ashley for recommending this one to me again. And I've really enjoyed talking about it with you, actually. I kind of, after we were trading those tweets back and forth, it's such an interesting game. It hooked both of us for all of its kind of thorns. And it is really nice after you've played one of these kind of games to come and kind of to try and tug at some of those little loose ends and to try and kind of untangle it just a little bit. So, yeah, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. It was a thrill to be invited. I love your show so much, and it's great to be on a show that you like. So I'm really glad to have this opportunity. I mean, I love tweeting with you and talking with you. So this is great. And the longing is something that really did stick with me. It really grabbed me. It made me think about things. And I know, like on your show, you definitely pick things apart. So I felt like this was going to be a definite curious conversation, rewarding conversation, engaging conversation, and it absolutely has been. So I'm really grateful to be here. I do want to give a quick shout out really quickly to Emily Morganti. So she was the PR rep who was handling this game. Friend of mine. We've known each other for like, I don't know, at least a decade, if not more. And she was the one that let me know that The Longing was coming out and kind of hooked me up with it. So my appreciation of this definitely stems back to Emily. So thank you, Emily, for listening to the show. Really appreciate you letting me know that The Longing came to Switch. Probably would not have played it if not for you. So thank you for that. And yeah, this has been great. I've loved this conversation. This has been wonderful.
Yeah, thanks a lot for doing it, Brad. Where can people come and find you online, and where can people find the podcast?
Well, you can find me online. I'm on Twitter and Instagram personally. It's my name, BradGallaway, all A's, no O's in my name. People always want to put an O in my last name, and there just is no O's. So do that if you'd like to find me personally. You can also come to GameCritics.com, where we update stuff, have new reviews, previews. We're starting to do some more videos. It's ad-free. We're all volunteers who do it for the love of it. So you can come and you're not going to be bothered by pop-ups or anything like that. No weird ads on the side of the page. It's just pure content. There is nothing else there. So come check that out. And if you'd like to give me a listen on the So Video Games podcast, we do host that at Game Critics. And it's also available anywhere you find your other podcasts, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or SoundCloud or anything. I think as far as I know, we're on all the services. So you should be able to find us. But if you can't find us there, come down to Game Critics, and we are definitely there.
Yeah, and I really recommend that people do that. So Video Games is great, and I love the volume of games that you guys get through. It's a great way to kind of to discover what's out there, and to kind of, I think I must have found tens of games from listening to So Video Games and been tempted to go and give them a try. So it's a really nice quality filter of all of the games that are coming out, and you guys really do the work for us to give us the good ones.
Oh, well, thank you. If anybody has not heard the show, the one thing that I would like them to take away is that we are absolutely honest about what we think about a game, and there's many shows where we just say we just straight up don't like something, and we'll tell you why. So as a listener myself of many podcasts, and as a person who buys a lot of games, I appreciate when people just don't rah cheerlead every single game, because sometimes people get like that, and I don't think that's really valid and honest. I mean, everybody's got their preferences, everybody's got their likes. So we really try to get in there and just be really honest. And maybe your taste will align more with my taste, or maybe you'll align more with Carlos's taste, or maybe neither. But at least you'll get a good, honest sense. Like, we never sugarcoat anything. We'll give it straight. And if we love something, we'll tell you we love it. We don't like it, we'll tell you we don't like it, and we'll tell you why. So there you go.
Right, and there is of course the kind of the ongoing Videogames seasoned subplot of Carlos trying to find a roguelike that he likes, right?
Oh, God.
Everyone's hanging out for this game to finally come along for him.
I don't know if that's ever going to happen. There may be quite a few years in that process, but we will see. Maybe he'll find one, maybe he won't. You'll just have to tune in and find out.
Okay, thanks a lot, Brad.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So that's our episode. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again to Brad Gallaway for coming on the show. I really enjoyed that conversation. It was really good to have some help untangling all the threads of that challenging, interesting, intriguing, strange little game, The Longing. Before I go, I will just remind you that if you would like to catch up with me on social media, you can find me at Twitter, Twitch, YouTube and Instagram as Gaming in the Wild. There is also that Patreon, so if you enjoyed today's show, you can come and join in on Patreon to get extra episodes, perks, and chat on the Discord server. That's patreon.com/gaminginthewilds. And I will be back next week with a new episode, maybe talking about Omno, that beautiful Game Pass game that I finished recently, maybe talking about something else completely. Thanks very much for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye-bye for now.